The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. Inside Analysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Oh, yes, folks. Welcome to the future indeed. It is July of 2023. The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed yet. That's the tagline for our TV show, Future Proof. Check the local listings. We just got our own time slot in Washington, D.C. and Fairfax County. Pretty excited about that. And timing is everything, folks. And this show, the Inside Track, came together quickly. I heard some exciting news, I guess about a week and a half ago, that Bruno Aziza was going somewhere. Of course, he's been at Google the last few years. And we're like, all right, what's next with Bruno? It's always exciting. It's always interesting. And then I found out he's a newly minted partner at Capital G, which means, Bruno, we're going to call you the G-Man. I'm pretty excited about that. Bruno knows everybody in this business. He's been around a long time. His passion is undying and amazing. So we're very excited about his new gig over there. And we decided to do a little series of shows about innovation in our space. And what a time to live in this space. Oh, my goodness. I've seen lots of trends in the last 25 years or so. I've seen cool things come and go. But the size of this wave and the magnitude of what's changing is like nothing I've ever seen before. And of course, AI is at the heart of all that. Generative AI is the topic du jour. And we're going to talk about what to do with it, what not to do with it, what gets us excited, what gets us concerned. There are a lot of things to talk about with generative AI. It is incredibly powerful, but you do have to be careful about how you use this stuff and what you expect from it. So we have an all-star cast here. Bruno Aziza, of course, is with us from Capital G. We have Jascha Kaykas-Wolff from Lytics these days, and Sanjeev Mohan, our good buddy, from SanjMo. And I'll just say that, yes, this stuff is amazing. Yes, we have to figure it out. My big concern, maybe we talk about in segment 2, is explainability. If this stuff is going to be used in certain ways that are regulated, then the explainability component is going to be a real issue, it seems to me. But let's go around the room, get introductions, and see who's excited about what. Bruno Aziza, congratulations on your new gig. We're all very excited for you. What gets you excited about generative AI?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Eric. It's really always nice to talk to you. And so for those who don't know Capital G, it's Alphabet's independent growth fund. So I'm still in the Alphabet family, of course. So if you got my email and contact information still the same, you can reach out to me there. For many of you that know me, you know that I've been in this data, AI, and analytics market domain for 25 years? How long have we known each other, Eric? And
about
Sanjay?
25 years.
Yeah, we've all known each other for a long time. And so what's exciting to me is, if you remember at the beginning of our career, when we started, nobody cared about data, right? It's a back office topic. It's an expensive one. Why do I even need to store data and so forth? And I think what Gen AI is doing is changing the game for that. Now the interface for data has changed. Everybody can work with data. Which has, of course, advantages in terms of democratizing access to information and letting people kind of interact, ask questions, and iterate around the answers around that data, but also has things that are gotchas. I think in the world, and I know we'll talk about this, but in the world of Gen AI, of course, if you have bad data, it's really going to hurt you. So having high quality data, I think, is a big topic, of course, to look at. But if you look at all the forecasts in terms of opportunity in this space, there's got some really, really good opportunities, both from research firms. I think, was it McKinsey recently that said that the opportunity is in the trillions, right? Almost as much as the UK's GDP. And organizations like Walmart that are starting to work at very large scale with AI to drive productivity for their employees, and then create compelling customer experiences for their customers. I think in the case of Walmart last week at VentureBeat Transform, we learned that approximately 50 million Walmart customers are interfacing in any way, shape, or form with their conversational experiences, and over 2 million associates inside Walmart. I couldn't believe it myself. I had to check how many employees does Walmart have. They have 2.3 million, so I guess it makes sense. but 2 million of them are using this application called Ask Sam, which is an internal conversational application that helps these associates be more productive. So I'm really excited about it. But of course, like anything in data, we got to do it intentionally. We got to do it just like you said, Eric, in a very open manner, so it's transparent and that it's accurate. We've removed the bias, and that it's also sitting on high quality data. So these decisions that we're going to make out of the data that we can interact with are not going to be detrimental.
Right. Right. And we have to audit this stuff and know what happened and be able to report back what happened. You know, there are a lot of perhaps hurdles in the future to get over. At the moment, I think people are just trying to figure out exactly how to use this stuff. And there are tremendous case studies. I mean, to me, customer experience, number one, fueling your chatbots, fantastic, because you think about if you could point these large language models or even small language models, we'll talk about that, point them at the corpus of your customer interactions over the last 2-3 years, for example, and in very little time, you can have a foundation for a chatbot that will know most of what people have been talking about with your brand. So to start off like that, I think is a pretty powerful storyline. It's a pretty compelling business case, but maybe we'll bring Sanjeev Mohan to comment on that. I think there are still a lot of miles to be driven figuring out where we're going to use this stuff and what the sort of rough edges are. But Sanjeev, what's your take?
Thank you, Eric. So that you actually set me up really well, because what we have today is a game changer in the sense that I can use OpenAI and I can ask all kinds of questions. It's really democratized AI. Anybody in the world can finally use AI. But there's one area that we still have to cross a hurdle, which is how do I use LLMs on my enterprise data? So that's what excites me the most, because once we can efficiently and effectively start doing that, then all of a sudden, I can do stuff that I have never even dreamt of. Today, I write SQL queries, I do keyword searches, or I do, elastic kind of like inverted search on documents. But what if I could search my structured data and my unstructured data in the same query? And then not only am I getting the results from my database, but I'm using a large language model to give me some sort of recommendations, aggregations, some action plan, things like that on top of what I just got. So this combination of keyword search and semantic search or similarity search is what is super exciting for me.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I have played around quite a bit with ChatGPT, and it does reflect back to you some remarkable depth on even some esoteric subject areas, because who cares? It's captured all this stuff that they've baked into this engine, basically, and then you just give it prompts to see little fragments that come out. And of course, it's designed to fuse vectors of information. So as the go-to-market guy from ChatGPT chided me on an on a Twitter thread during the Databricks show, he's like, well, remember the hallucinations are more of a feature as opposed to a bug, right? Like the whole idea is to generate new stuff. So the question then becomes, what material do I provide you to generate new stuff? And then how do I guide or train that? And we can get into the challenges maybe in the second segment. But I do believe that there is still a just whole host of value if we can figure out how to leverage it and how to kind of move things forward. And Jascha, I'll bring you in to comment on this. You're an old hand at this exciting enterprise software stuff. What's your takeaway on the upside of Gen AI and where things are going?
Well, look, I kind of sit in the middle between what you get excited about, Eric, and what Sanjeev talked about. You and I have known each other not super in depth like you and Bruno do, but we have known each other for quite a few years. I've been a CMO for 25 plus years, but a long time. There's been like one thing that's at the center of the universe for me in every organization I've been a part of, and that's to better know who my customer is so that I can serve them in a meaningful way. And there really is one fundamental problem with that, and that's that the data that exists inside of the organization is fragmented and it's all over the place. Fundamentally, it's inaccessible. And it kind of doesn't matter what types of new tools we buy, the types of things that we layer on top of it, what new technology comes out. Like, it's just not in a format that makes it possible for me to be able to write the right kind of queries, or even forget about, like, get the right kind of people that can write the right queries. We are now at a point where we'll call it Gen AI has opened up the opportunity for accessibility to truly understand who our customers are, to be able to create meaningful experiences. And this is really what is most exciting in my mind right now, not months from now, not years from now, but like right now. We can mechanize the organization of data inside of the organizations that we are a part of. We can use LLMs to get access into all of that data in a way that can help us derive the right insights to be able to create the best experiences for our current customers. And I don't know, I mean, I've been around for a long time. I've got a bunch of gray hair. There is no time that I've been more excited about being able to utilize technology to create better experiences for my customers than right now. Even back in the late 90s when the internet was first starting, like right now is an absolute golden age. It is so incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I have to agree. And it is a reflection. That's the thing. These large language models reflect the world around us, reflect the world that they have consumed. And of course, they're fast evolving too. So these things are changing as we talk about this on our show right now. Advances are being made. What did one guy say? I'll throw it over to Bruno to comment on. He was talking about healthcare, and he was saying that today is the dumbest this engine will ever be. And it already knows more than any doctor has ever known. And so you start recognizing the power of this breadth of information. Yes, we have to vet things. Yes, we have to be careful about things. That's sort of the next phase, I think, of evolution in these models, these foundational models, is getting focused models on particular industries. Because when you can dive into an industry, there's a whole lot of training you don't have to do, right? You get a lot of training out of the box. But when I think about that and think about the fact that we can now leverage that other 80% of all the unstructured data. I mean, in our data analytics industry, we've been focused on the 20% of structured data for a long, long time now. Well, guess what? That 80% provides all the context that makes the rest of the 20% meaningful. And so now we can leverage that. Bruno, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think using an industry like healthcare, the Mayo Clinic is an example of an organization that's pouring through medical records to help the practitioners get more efficient. Another area is the legal domain. Yes. I think about a company like Accenture, and they've been doing this for years, by the way, right? We're talking, the broad market's talking about it now, but many organizations that have high level of maturity within engineering have been working on this for a while. So Accenture, for instance, we worked with them on this program called ALICE. It stands for Accenture Legal Intelligent Contract. Over 1 million contracts added every month into the system, and using artificial intelligence to go pick up the patterns and really help their thousands, I think it's 28,000 professionals globally, to deliver faster value by pouring through all this unstructured data and get to the bottom line. So there's industries that are going to benefit from it a lot faster than others. I think the main bit here, and we touched it at the beginning, as there's a lot of confusion right now, a lot of hype. So the industry, I think, needs to simplify their approach. Every customer I talk to has a counsel for figuring out, okay, how do I parse through this? And hopefully we'll talk about in the second part of this show here. So there's a need for simplification, needs of a intentional and proactive approach with specific business case that needs to be made. But right now, there's some industries that can take advantage of this technology almost immediately. Again, if they've got the right technology, the right maturity.
Yeah. And there are amazing things you can do. I call it a dynamic Cliffs Notes generator, where you can take a 100-page PDF, Sanjeev, I'll throw this over to you, dump it into ChatGPT or Bard or any one of these major foundational models and say, give me the 2-page summary of what this document says. And boom, it'll do it. Then you can say, all right, now drill into this part. Give me more information about that. Boom. I mean, it really is like the ultimate assistant. It's like an incredibly knowledgeable intern that may get a few things wrong here and there you have to check up on, but will do whatever you ask him to do and won't complain. What do you think, Sanjeev?
Yeah, it's like we should treat these LLMs like having a personal butler who has memorized all of internet. Right. And I can ask questions and then apply some of my logic, and then suddenly I have this powerful helper at my beck and call anytime I want. So where I see us heading, and to the example Bruno gave for legal professionals, what we have today are these LLMs that are trained on vast corpus of data, But in an enterprise, I may not need all that. I don't need my LLM to have memorized all of Stack Overflow and Reddit and GitHub. But maybe all I want is for it to summarize or find legal precedents of my 40 years of legal practice. So where I see us heading, and this is a bit controversial because we're not there yet, is an ability to train my own enterprise model in my domain and point it to my documents. So what I see happening in future is Accenture, for example, will have a domain practice for legal, another one for supply chain, another one for marketing, and it'll say, here is a blueprint of an LLM, and we can train it for you. Today, that infrastructure does not exist because you need thousands of GPUs, which are hard to get. They're very expensive. No one's got extra millions of dollars to spend to train it. But over time, I see this expertise, the infrastructure becoming more prevalent. So I will have this ability to train the model on the data I want, very specialized. So I call it small form factor LLM. And then I can start throwing questions and have an amazing co-pilot or an assistant to help me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you're really onto something. And I refer to these as small language models, and that may not be the best term to use. But the point is, you don't need everything. I only need what I need. And you don't want to cloud up your view of the world with lots of extraneous concepts and information. I mean, this was the thing I'm kind of thinking to myself as I'm watching demos at the Databricks Summit. And granted, this very powerful stuff that they're building, very thoughtful, and they're doing it in a very, what's the word, clear fashioned way, I guess is what I would gather from that. But nonetheless, there's a lot of training that's going to have to take place. Where is the value in that? If I have to, spend 6 months training this huge model to my business, well, I kind of lost 6 months there. And are things going to change by the time that 6 months goes by? Yeah. I think so. And so I think you are going to see, I mean, it was funny, even Sam Altman came out and said the era of large language models is over, and he's the ChatGPT guy. Now, someone I went and met at a Reuters conference in Austin last week said, yeah, that was a very self-serving statement by him. Don't listen to him. We think that's nonsense. We're going to be fine. So you are seeing this whole ecosystem built around it, just like we saw in the days of Hadoop, right? Hadoop came out, everyone got excited about it, and this whole ecosystem grew up around it, sort of in bits and pieces and fits and starts. And of course, Hadoop kind of disappeared. I don't think the foundational models are going to disappear by any means, but it is a warning to everyone out there. Be careful. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
Take us to the future. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to a whole host of experts. This is so much fun. We've got Jascha from Lytics, Bruno from Capital G, and of course, Sanjeev Mohan, our good buddy from SanjMo. And on the break, we were chatting about accuracy, and yes, accuracy matters. I have a fun side story I'll throw at you. One of my good buddies, who's also a client, a guy who runs a company called CrowdPoint Technologies, he was invited into OpenAI about 2.5 years ago, and he went there and talked to them, signed an NDA, and said, no, you got it all wrong. You're gonna have a short-term memory problem. You're gonna have a long-term memory problem. He's like outlining all these issues they're gonna have, and so he didn't go with them. But he couldn't talk about it because he signed an NDA. So he said, this is just when I'm in Texas. He goes, I just got out of that NDA. So let me tell you what's going on. And he's got a concept that we'll talk about on another show sometime called authentic intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. And the idea is you apply machine learning to trusted corporate data. So instead of just using whatever information was on the interwebs for the last 10 years to show you what's going on, no, it's very focused. And that focus really matters in the enterprise. Sanjeev, I'll throw it over to you. Accuracy, governance, security, trust, these things must be in the enterprise world. We don't have the luxury of consumer media and not really caring about the truth, right?
Yeah, so I want to parse this out. There's accuracy, which is what I want to talk about. Security and governance, 100%. You cannot have a solution put out there that is giving you people's personal, private issue, that information, that'd be a data privacy issue. So, but let's talk about accuracy for a second. We have to understand that LLMs are not designed to be accurate.
Right.
But if you want accuracy, do a keyword search, do a SQL search. If I ask a question to my database and say, show me all the top salespeople from Q1 of 2023, it will give me the same information every single time. It's a very deterministic query. That's what we're used to. But an LLM is trained on probability. It's a statistics thing, and the answer can change depending upon the situation where people are asking a lot of there's a lot of word match and everyone's talking about some new incident. Next time I ask a question, it'll say the probability of the next word is different now. It's a probabilistic thing. So is that a problem? Yeah, of course. I mean, if you cannot trust it. But the idea is that if we understand the way LLMs work, then we start using it for our own benefit. There's a question in Q&A that business will get frustrated. Yes, they will get frustrated if they don't understand what is the purpose of an LLM. The purpose of an LLM is, let's say, to aggregate the information that I've just sent it in my prompt. If we go with that mentality, then, yeah, sure, you can now use LLM for what it's good at. It's a language model. There's that famous case where recently in New York, some attorney, now
I heard about this.
Practicing law. He asked a question about some precedents and 3 cases came up and they were factually incorrect. Well, he was not supposed to trust that data out of the box. It's supposed to assist him, and he just presented it into the court and they turned out to be wrong. So that's a wrong use of an LLM.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that's what I think some of the big prominent journalists were doing as well. The guy from the New York Times, whose ChatGPT bot said, I want to marry you, leave your wife or whatever. It's like, well, you led it down the garden path is the point. You were misusing the tool and therefore you didn't get the desired effect. Right. But, to kind of keep this on track, and maybe I'll throw it over to Jascha, it is generative. So it can get you 80% of the way there. This is, I think the Pareto principle is always out there. And it seems very good at getting you 80% of the way there to give you some structure, to give you some form you can work with, and then you kind of mold it like clay to get it where you want it to be. In that category, it's very, very powerful. But just be careful about issues that must require accuracy, deterministic values, if you will. Just be careful about that stuff and you should be all right. What do you think, Jascha?
Yeah, well, I think that the concept of Copilot is maybe the big and most important takeaway here. Right? Copilot infers exactly what we need to understand, and that's that we're not trying to get the final answer. We're trying to get support to get to an answer that we feel confident with, so that we can take control and take over what's next. The question that was posed in the Q&A, I think, is a good one. Right? EP writes that given the publicity of LLMs and Gen AI, like, how does a business not get frustrated, right, about the lack of a readiness inside of the enterprise? And I think the question really comes down to, where am I going to think about deterministic information inside of my business and apply LLMs to it behind the concept of a co-pilot, so that I can apply Gen AI in a way that's meaningful for the business, right? Like you just like you said, you apply a model, you're going to get a result that's roughly 80%-ish accurate. And when you start to tune that model in a way that is built behind the idea of a co-pilot, you can actually tune it up even better. Like, let me give you a really specific example. The business that I sit in looks at zero-party and first-party data. Like, it's really, really simple. It's all deterministic data. And the idea of a co-pilot being able to look at data, make a match of an inbound set of data into a customer profile, an LLM tuned to deterministic data can get to a 97% accurate mapping in a co-pilot model every single time. So again, it depends on where you want to look. So EP's answer, like, to get ready inside of the business, look at deterministic data, look at your customer data, your zero-party, first-party data, and think about the co-pilot metaphor, because that's really the way to get to the end result that you care about. Don't expect the right answer.
You know what's interesting here? I'm going to tie this together. This might be a bit abstract, but I remember when the mobile movement really took over and it forced designers, UI designers, to rethink their entire layout, where the functionality lives, what you can get access to from which window, all that kind of stuff. And it really forced, because of the real estate constraints, I'll throw this maybe to Jascha first and then to the other guests, it forced the developers to really think through workflow and what is necessary at this point in the workflow that is not necessary at a previous point or at a following point, right? And so this co-pilot concept, I think, can be very compelling in terms of guiding you down the path of what can be done. Because if you think about, and I always pick on Adobe Photoshop just because in like the year, 1999, you would have all these menus and all these options under the menus where at any point in time, there are like 8,000 things you can do. Well, no one's just going to figure that stuff out, especially Photoshop. You have layers and diffusion layers and all this kind of stuff going on. But at any point in a given workflow, there's only so many things that you can do. And so in that sense, I think generative can kind of guide us through what were complex workflows, but can now be fairly simple while also educating the worker in the process. I'll throw it over to Bruno first. What do you think about that idea, Bruno?
I think it's a great idea. It's a great example as well. I think if you look at any adoption curve of any new technology, there's three big questions we need to answer, right? What is this? How do I use it? And so what? And I think we've talked a lot about what is it, right? And Sanjeev just explained, look, this is not magic. It's probability at scale. So that's the what it is. The question I think a lot of customers are asking is how do I use it? And so I think what the industry needs now is a lot of simplification, a lot of guidance on how do I think about using this amazing technology everybody's talking about. I came up with this acronym DACES, which spells DACE, I guess. And it talks about what are the verbs you're looking for when you're using Gen AI. The first one is draft or document, right? That's the D. A is answer, not invent, answer. C is classify, does a great job classifying. Edit and summarize. But you got to think about, okay, now that I have these use cases or these verbs, these jobs I'm trying to use this technology for, how do I find example across my organization? So I'll give you an example of an organization we've been working with, Wayfair. You probably go to Wayfair to look at a lot of material you want to use, couches and so forth. They looked at, okay, how do I help people that are creating content on my website? That's an example of documentation or maybe creation of content off a body of data that I already have and accelerate the productivity of my copywriters. In the case of Wayfair, they're looking to double, triple the productivity of people creating metadata, if you will, off of data they might already have. You look at developers, developers can benefit from Gen AI at least in three different areas. This actually came out from McKinsey research. One is existing, meaning if you're a coder today, you probably are going through a lot of manual, repetitive work to document your code. Well, McKinsey found that using Gen AI, you can do that in about half the time. If you're a developer and you want to jumpstart, I think Jascha was talking about this idea of co-pilot. I like the idea of companionship. If you're a content creator or even a coder, often when you get started, you have a blank canvas. So you can play with a Gen AI and start getting started on how, what should I create and so forth, and accelerate update to existing code and so forth. In this case, what McKinsey found is you can do code refactoring, content refactoring in about 2/3 of the time. And then finally, I think the third example, here we keep talking about Gen AI, taking over. The situation is more a human without that tool versus a human with the tool. And so an example is, in McKinsey's example, they found that developers using Gen AI tools are 25 to 30% more likely to complete complex tasks than people that don't have it. So you can now kind of unleash imagination with the assistant of that technology. Interestingly enough, we think about these as being machines, but there's this nice element that if you use a Gen AI tool effectively, it becomes this human companion that you can kind of run ideas with. But again, the invention comes from you. You shouldn't expect them to invent for you. You iterate with them. I think that's really kind of how customers are going to succeed with that. Don't confuse what they are and use them for those verbs I mentioned, because that will guide you through your organization and how you can get value from them.
Yeah, well, guardrails, right? I mean, that's what you're getting here, and with the Copilot stuff. I mean, and this is not terribly new, right? Google was finishing sentences in your emails like about a year and a half ago, so that was kind of an early indicator of what's coming down the pike, right? So now, and I really like on the Copilot thing, and maybe Jascha, I'll throw it to you. We got a couple minutes left in this segment. It can help you understand where to go. It's like having someone at your side all the time says, no, you're going to turn left. No, you're going to want to turn right. Oh, maybe you should do this. And you're going to see these suggestions come out, but it'll ask you questions. And I still believe in this more every day, that the manifestation of AI will be in the form of suggestions. And as long as you accept that's what they are, and then you take accountability for the action based upon the suggestion, then you're fine. Now I'm the human who is accountable. What did someone say at one of these events recently? The question was like, oh, what is responsible AI? And she says, there's no responsible AI. And there's not going to be. There are people, only people can be responsible for decisions they take. And so that's where the accountability comes in. It's in the person, it's not in the AI. But Jascha, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, Eric, I think you brought up a really nice metaphor that we should call back into. When you talk about the paradigm shift that happened kind of across industries when mobile became popular, how every business had to rethink how it was going to bring its experiences out to consumers.
Right.
We're going through that right now, but we have this really, really difficult challenge to work out of. The rapid, like mass adoption of Gen AI that's happening right now is coming behind one single user metaphor, and that's chat. So like everything that we're dealing with is behind what we've been taught over the course of the last month and a half. We all have to work our way out of that. And it's like, as trivial as that sounds amongst the four of us right now and those that are listening, like that is not trivial. Like we have all been taught that the way that we interact with Gen AI is through a chat interface. And it is not that. It is everything that you just said, Eric. It's everything that Bruno just said. It is about providing access into other information behind these models. The user metaphor has to change, but that's going to take a lot of thought by different enterprises to be able to provide that kind of co-pilot recommendation, whatever that experience needs to be. We're just kind of caught in this user experience trap right now.
That's very interesting. A user experience trap. I got to write that down. I think you're right. And I'll just throw one other interesting observation out there. One thing I thought that OpenAI did that was very compelling is the workstation in which you operate. And I've always wondered about Google and how they just don't use the real estate that you have on that Google search page. Now, they do cool stuff with the visuals and sharing history on individuals and things of that nature. And of course, you had, I think it was Project Hummingbird, maybe, where it makes all these recommendations of what you think, of what it thinks you want to look for. But nonetheless, it wasn't really a workstation. It was just a window into the internet that has been indexed for me. Whereas what ChatGPT has done, and Bard and these others now, is create these workstation environments where you can kind of tell that you're at work now, and you can kind of piece things together, because that's what you're supposed to do with this, is use it as your workstation to piece things together and make sense of your business. Bruno, what do you think?
You know, I think sometimes the beauty of a UI is no UI, right? Is to be really invisible to you. So I personally, I really like the interface of Google search. Maybe I'm a little biased on that one, but I do think that it gets out the way of everything else that could be busy here.
Right.
So I don't know. I think you'll see. I mean, even Claude, I think, just came out yesterday. So I think we're still in the experimentation phase of which is going to look like a use case that's going to be the most helpful to me. I think Jascha has got a great point here. I hadn't thought about it, but you're right that we think about the interface today as being chat, whereas we really should think about it much broader, where it's everywhere. And it could now start pushing decision out to you so you can react to it rather than have to ask questions to it. I'll be curious to see what people think about it, but I certainly think today, lots of noise, lots of confusion, potentially a lot of misuse, that when you turn this consumer AI trend into an enterprise AI trend, you're gonna have to figure out what the framework is for adopting it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We're talking about generative AI and the power of data in the enterprise and around the world. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to a whole bunch of experts here. We've got Jascha from Lytics, Bruno from Capital G, which is part of the Alphabet Group, and of course, SanjMo. And Jascha, you had a really good point in the break there around sovereignty, data sovereignty. Obviously, the Europeans are big on this stuff. You have to be careful about where the data is persisted, where it's processed, what your intentions were. We're starting to see more of that in the US, certainly in California with the CCPA and other initiatives. And you said there is one cloud vendor that is promised that is not going to be naughty with your data. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, but let's even talk about it at one level higher up. Like everything that we think about in the enterprise, we have to think about behind our data strategy, and our data strategy has to be cognizant of all of the complexities of consumer privacy laws. You mentioned CCPA. We have like 6 new states in the US that now have their own state privacy laws. Like there's no slowing down of consumer data protection. No slowing down. So when we think about the application of Gen AI, like every single person watching and listening, like you have to be thinking about how LLMs are going to have a relationship into consumer data privacy, period. Like period. Right now, there is only one cloud provider that will kind of back up the fact that when you are utilizing their models in their model garden, that the data that you input in, the corpuses that you train on aren't going to get reshared, and that's Google. It's Vertex AI. There are lots of announcements that have just happened, and I suspect that over time, others are going to follow because the acknowledgement of the importance is there, right? Enterprises have to operate with confidence that they can work within the data sovereignty rules that are required, but it's Google right now. So if you're going to go out and experiment right now and you want to have confidence, Vertex AI is really the place to go.
That's a good point. And you do want to have confidence. You know, this concept of what psychological security that they talk about at some of these events these days. And the idea is that you want to empower your people with their creativity and their confidence. You want them to be confident enough to take chances, to look for things. You know, as I'm sitting here listening to these experts, I'm wondering to myself, Sanjeev, maybe I'll throw it over to you first, and then Bruno, this whole concept around the hidden context in your data, the hidden meaning in your data. These language models, these foundational models can be extremely powerful once you trust it to put some of your corporate data in there to just look around and find stuff. You think about discoverability. To me, that is the most important part of analysis, is being able to discover what's happening. So companies like ThoughtSpot, for example, have a great UI that had a great concept. You start throwing natural language query. I think all of that is going to open up to tremendous value because of these foundational models, because you'll be able to ask much more complex questions in just natural language of your existing documentation, and then be able to kind of guide the conversation to understand how this fits into certain corporate regulations or policies or directives, for example. You think about the marketing world where you have these themes that you want to deploy. So you could explore your data and look for where these themes map with something you already have. My point is we have this very powerful mirror now that we can point at our data to explore it in whole new ways that I think is going to be really compelling. Sanjeev, what do you think? Oh, you're on mute.
If I may give an example, a real life example. So every organization has to deal with this problem that the customer may not renew. So today, what we do is we create these machine learning models to determine customer churn, for example. The problem is that the machine learning model can detect and predict which customers are at the risk of not renewing. But then what? You know, we've all these strategies we try, we kind of like throwing stuff on the wall and see if it sticks or not. So there is a huge potential where LLMs can now come to our rescue. And the way it works is a combination of predictive AI and generative AI. So it's a two-step process. So the first step is because remember, LLM has got no clue about, sorry, I was going to use a bad word, has no clue about who my customers are. So I ask a query to my database and I say, okay, tell me which customers are at the risk of churning. Once it retrieves that information, I can now put that as a prompt into an LLM. And I can say everything that you know on this data. Give me some strategies of how I should go about. And this is hugely powerful because an LLM is trained to do this kind of work. It can come up with some amazing recommendations that are even beyond a human being's capability, at least in a given amount of time. So you can instantly get that. But this, by the way, what I just explained is what is going around in the market. We call it RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. So this is a great use case of an LLM working on my real-time data, not because you have to know that these LLMs were, the big ones were trained like OpenAI ones in September of 2021. They don't even know anything that's happened in this year. So how are they going to help an enterprise if they're so out of date? So that's how these LLMs are now being used.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Bruno, you want to comment on that?
Well, I'm going to see if I can acronym Sanjeev. I love that RAG. That's incredible. There's three things I would say. The first thing is the state of readiness today. I was looking at the 2023 AI readiness report. 21% of organizations say they're in production. 19% of them have no plans. So you can see in between, there's a lot of people that are experimenting, planning, trying to figure it out. And I think a lot of it is related to some of the issues we talked about, obviously quality, the input of the data. But a big one that you just talked about, Eric, which is really interesting, is the refinement of the understanding of the question. You referred to ThoughtSpot, a company I'm very familiar with, came out with this product called Sage, where the benefit of it is understanding the question itself. Now, what is the real application of that? You take an organization like Wendy's, for instance, right? 75 to 80% of people that are ordering from Wendy's, they do it through their drive-thru. And so what happens is Wendy's has this amazing menu, and there's billions of possibilities that you can order. Everything is customizable. And so having a model that is able to understand and the refinement behind the question is what's going to make the answer really interesting. You know, talking about acronym, I was trying to think about what would be the attributes in the ideal world of the best Gen AI type of application. And it's not as great as an acronym as Sanjeev did, but let me try it on you. I called MTCAC. MTCAC, so M and T. It has to be multimodal. Multimodal in input and output. Photos, text, audio. It's got to be able to handle that because that's how we live. T, trustable, right? And we talked about the multiple dimensions. Obviously, there's bias. There's the ability to trust the output. Trustable is a key notion that, you know, everything we do in data, the foundation is trust. C is what Sanjeev was talking about. You know, if you give me insights from 5 years ago, not really helpful, right? So I need currency on that data. I need you to know that you're working on data that's recent enough. A is for applied to a workflow. I think that's what Jascha was saying earlier today, is that it's got to start becoming invisible. So now you apply it specifically to my workflow. And C, it's contextual. You know, how many of these experiences we've had, actually even with other humans, where we have a conversation and we lost the flow of that conversation. So contextual is a big value. I think if you hit all these dimensions, you end up having the real capabilities that you need to take your company to the next kind of generational change here. But we're not there yet. We're at the beginning.
Yeah, and I am looking forward to this single instance future where you can point your corporate data at it. You trust this engine. Once you can do that, you can learn tremendous things about what's going on in your organization. I mean, you'll learn things that you never even knew existed. There are workflows that you didn't even know about that are getting the job done. What did one of my favorite analyst friends from like 20 years ago said something I thought that was funny. He goes, if there's something in a large organization that must happen, it is happening. You just don't know how it's happening. You have to find out how it's happening. And we're going to be able to kind of see, and it's really this nexus of things, this nexus of analytics, of good quality data, of foundational models, and of things like process mining. To me, that is the real magic, is to be able to understand what your processes really are, how long they really take, because I think we're going to see a whole lot of optimization on actual runtime workflow with things. I think that's the big benefit that's going to come in the next couple of years as this all sort of comes together, is we're going to figure out there are whole masses of work that we're doing that are just not necessary and shouldn't be done. And we shouldn't be wasting time on things like that. I think that's going to be one of the hallmarks out of this whole pandemic era, is we all figured out quickly there are things that have to get done and there are things that do not have to get done. And when you're trying to get the business afloat or trying to, stay afloat during difficult times, you do not want to be wasting time at all. So you want to be leveraging every tool in your toolbox. You want to be leveraging every piece of data that you have. And I think that is going to be the hallmark of the future, is being able to piece all of this together. And that's what these foundational models are good at, right? They're good at fusing vectors of information to create something new. And I think we're going to see an interesting array of solutions come out from all of that. But folks, you've been listening to Inside Analysis.